what I did just realize, what I did just find out on this service, they added these media elements here, so I can hold on. Let me see if this will work. You hear that?
Yep.
Oh yeah. So now I can give really proper guest intros and be like, all right, with us on the show today, and then have the whole crowd background noise. It'll be great. But Ben, thank you so much for coming on, brother. Really amped to talk training with you. We just got to hang out. Man, what was that? 2 weekends ago? 3 weekends ago? Out there in Kentucky. And so I'll let you give your own little intro here in a second. But what I'm going to preface the episode quickly with the fact that I think you are a very impressive strength athlete in terms of the robustness and well-roundedness of what you can do. We always like to talk about those pillars of performance. And I think you're a really good example of somebody who brings kind of all of those things to the table: strength, hypertrophy, power, and then especially for your size and how good you are at those first three, your endurance is pretty impressive as well. So I think it's going to be fun just to unpack maybe your training journey, big lessons you've learned along the way, things that you've done and tried that you feel were really successful in helping you to continue to level up month over month, year over year. But before we go there, let's just pause and let you intro yourself to everyone who's listening and may not know who Ben Eisenmenger is.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks again for having me on. I always love chatting with other people and continuing some of the stuff we talked about a couple weekends ago. So Ben Eisenmenger, I'm a gym owner in Northern Kentucky, more specifically Erlanger, Ellesmere. This is where I was kind of grew up, went to school around here. I'm a father of three, married. I like to compete in all sorts of strength events like kettlebell competitions, most recently strongman competitions. I've done grip events, and I'm also a full-time coach. So I've been doing personal training since the day I turned 18, and that's pretty much all I've ever done. And here recently just opened up a gym so I could consolidate all my efforts, do it out of one shop, and try to build up a nice strength community in the area.
Awesome, man. And fresh off of winning Kentucky's Strongest Man, by the way. So huge congratulations on that.
Yeah, I won my second Kentucky Strongest Man. It was a late entry, so I'm paying for the damage from that. I won it in 2018. I've also won West Virginia Strongest Man in 2020, right before the world shut down. And then this year, I also won United States National Strongman Championship as a middleweight. So it's been a successful few years. And I owe a good amount of that to Rebel and you for help coaching me and expose my weaknesses and help work on me in the off season. It's been quite the journey.
Yeah, man, it's been fun watching you just grow so much every time I turn around every 3 to 6 months, your rate of progress is so impressive. So let's backtrack here for people, and maybe let's start with, you say middleweight and strongman. Let's put some actual context in that for people who may not know what that is. What is your height and weight?
So I'm 6 foot, walk around about 230 pounds, which is a middleweight in strongman. Most people, in boxing, that's a heavyweight. But in strongman, you're looking at, the lightweight classes go up to about 185. The middleweight is a 200 class and also up to about 231 or 220. And then heavyweights go up to 300, and then there's super heavyweights. So I started the sport as a middleweight, and I've stayed this weight class forever, which is a really big challenge for a lot of people, because as you get stronger, you consume more calories, mass moves mass. A lot of these guys will grow out of the weight class. So it's been a challenge for me to how do I continue to get stronger, faster, better while maintaining my size? And so that comes with a little bit of calorie manipulation and make sure you're recovering well. And but it's kept me from having to buy a whole bunch of new clothes, and it's probably helped me win more because a lot of these guys who outgrow the weight class, I've managed to stay here. So that's this whole separate challenge. But this is a comfortable weight for me, so I've just kind of maintained it really since I was about 13, really 12 years old. I've been about this size. So I've just maintained it for 20 years.
So let's give you more context here. So you compete at 230, and we were talking a little bit about the most recent Kentucky Strongest Man, just so people have an idea of a middleweight strongman athlete. And this is just one domain of what you do, right? I think you mentioned earlier you're also heavily involved in the kettlebell world, and you've done some other things as well. But let's just use this most recent strongman event as a frame of reference for people so they can understand the type of loads that are being lifted and moved at a body weight of 230 pounds?
Yeah. So the event list, for reference, the first event was a max axle clean and press. I got fifth place with a 285 clean and press, and that's a 2-inch fat bar.
Thick
which
bar,
some guys,
people. That's not for people listening that don't know, this is not a normal casual barbell. This is a thick barbell. Like,
you
people
can't
watching.
just clean it.
Yeah.
Most people can't. Luckily, I got these big old mitts. So, but for the most part, you have to do the kind of funky continental clean, and this is a different setup. So it's a lot harder than the Olympic lifting clean and jerk. And so the winning press was a 325, which is very impressive for someone who's only 230 pounds and isn't an Olympic athlete. Then we went to farmer's carry, which we're looking at about 200. We were 285 per hand. So, over 560 pound carry as fast as possible.
What was the distance?
60 feet. And so I won that event. That's one of my better events. Luckily, because I do enough conditioning work and speed and agility work to not move like a broken refrigerator all the time. And I think that's one of your terms. It's one of my favorites. There's a max deadlift. So I won the max deadlift with a 710 deadlift, and which was tough. And there's one other guy pulling 700. Most guys were in the 600s. And then we had a yoke carry. So that's kind of like basically you're carrying a power rack. It's bottom loaded, and that was a 700 pound carry. So, that's nice to compress the spine and still try to move through the hips and the ankles. And then we did a keg over bar. So lift a 300 pound keg over the bar as many times as you can, about a 52-inch bar. So I don't know if you can see it. Biceps are all bruised up like crazy, and somehow sprained a thumb. I don't even know how that happened, but it's, the next day you just kind of lick your wounds and take a week or so to recover. And then we're crazy. We look for the next one to do after that.
And then as another frame of reference for people, because we had been chatting, the last few months about really kind of building up more of this endurance component. And so what was the most recent? Because you wrote, I'm trying to remember what screenshot you sent me. Because you sent me was it a 2K row?
Yeah. So I just tested my 1 mile row. I was trying to see if I could hit a 7-minute 2K.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to maintain that pace through 1,600 meters. So, a 7-minute 2K row, I think is doable for me. So that was what I was going for. And we were just kind of also training to maybe attempt a 6-minute mile run, which I think I was just barely off on that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give it a good shot this spring.
Yeah. And so the only reason I'm really asking these questions, and I know for someone like you, it can sometimes be awkward, like really talk about yourself. But the only reason I'm really asking these questions is because I want everybody listening to actually have a really solid frame of reference for how well-rounded you actually are in terms of your performance, right? Like, you're not someone who walks in the gym with a 700 plus pound deadlift at 230, which is enormous, but then, can't really move or gets out of breath walking up a flight of stairs or, right? Like, you do well across all these domains. And if you're sitting at 230, pulling 700 plus, and even the threat of a 6-minute mile being there is incredibly impressive. And so I guess my first question is going to be, have you always enjoyed training in this particular fashion to really be so well-rounded and robust? Or did you start off pigeonholing yourself and then expand from there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of had a weird way around this. As being even a big kid, I didn't play football growing up. I ran cross country, believe it or not.
Really?
Because our school was so small.
That.
Yeah. we didn't have a football team or wrestling or anything that invoked testosterone at all. So all my friends were started running cross country, and I was like, you know what? I just want to be a part of a team and do something. And so I ran cross country, but I was mostly interested in bodybuilding type training.
So you were this hybrid type individual from the get-go almost.
Yeah, it was just not the best training ideas. So I started off more prioritizing strength. I was a shot put thrower as well, and was that total guy, like out of breath walking up steps, couldn't really do anything athletic at all without getting worn out. So I biased strength early on. I think this would built a big base for me and built a lot of my hypertrophy, allowed me to just stay thick all the time. And really what kind of changed me was when Ryan Patrick, one of you guys coaches, has the second best gym in Erlanger.
I hope he listens to this.
he ran the Silverback program. And I remember you guys were just so like animals. The program, I guess people don't know, was kind of the initial test of challenging these strength, conditioning, hypertrophy, and just to see the way that he was pushed himself with the other guys in the group. All of them were pretty muscular and strong. And I just realized that like I wouldn't have been able to hang at all. Like I could have done the strength work, but as soon as the reps climbed up, and so I really had to evaluate, was I really as fit as I thought I was? And so that's when I started to incorporate a lot more aerobic training and started to dive more down the Joel Jamison's conditioning methods and really learning more about rowing. Luckily I have a couple of clients that are former college rowers. So just it triggered my interest in conditioning and all these other ways to train. And I noticed from watching the guys, like nobody got weaker training these things. In fact, it looked like everyone was just training harder. And so I was like, if I had a deadlift session, I couldn't deadlift again for 10 days. It would just wreck me. And same thing, squats would wreck me for a week. And as I got more into conditioning, I had to learn to not just crush myself every session, but to build that slow aerobic base. I started to recover quicker, and I was sleeping better, and my mobility got better. That was the interesting one. As my resting heart rate dropped, my mobility got better, even though I wasn't doing any mobility work. So I think that was the Silverback program was the one that shined the light on my weakness, and I've used the last few years to really build that up. And lo and behold, I've only gotten stronger and performed better. And it really was about the time that I started winning a lot more.
Yeah, that's such an interesting one, because in that strength world in particular, I think you still have a lot of people that carry around that misnomer of, oh, well, if I do my conditioning, I'm just going to melt away and lose all of my gains, because if I like go for a light tempo run, or if I jump on this assault bike, obviously what's going to happen, because science is all of my muscles are just going to melt off my body and I'm no longer going to be strong. But at this point in time, we know that's just blatantly not true. It's only true if you organize the training in a really, really dumb way. Yeah. We have enough evidence from all the athletes and people we've coached who say the same things you're saying of, oh, when I started to really implement and prioritize my conditioning, everything else started to get better with it. Yeah,
it really is just like a calorie balance. Everyone says, oh, you're going to wither away. And they talk about like marathon runners. It's like, well, I'm only doing like 30 minutes conditioning. It's not really burning that many calories. And if weight's really the issue, then you can just add an intra-workout carb. And then it was like the idea of not using cardio as a way to burn or lose, but as a way to develop other pathways. Am I developing, my cardiac output? Am I expanding capillary density? Like once I got away from the idea, like this is for weight loss and burning and more of this is a development process, then it just enhanced everything. And really, it goes to show like you can't just cardio off all your body fat, because otherwise right now I'd have actually lost some weight when I wanted to. But that, yeah, you're right. That's such a misnomer. I try to really correct a lot of people in the strength world of, do your conditioning work. That's just lazy to miss it. And you're really just asking yourself for trouble later on.
Mm-hmm. So we have cardio here, I think, as one big contributor. Can you think of other examples, big rocks that over time for you feel have really contributed to your success as a strength athlete? If there are any things that really jump off the page at you in terms of strategies, tactics, training methodologies, implements, tools, anything you got?
So I think my big two that I prefer the most is the assault bike, because it's just pure work. Like there's no downtime. There's no thought process. There's no pounding on the joints. I can genuinely put a lot of effort into it, and it's not technique driven. And like I like the rower, but there's still a slide. You get the slide back in, and it's still pounding away at the same muscles that we might be using. even running. Like I love running, but it kind of beats up on the joints. So the bike has just been an awesome tool to like work some of these anaerobic methods, and even the high duration aerobic methods. The bike is awesome. And then I really enjoy med ball work. I feel like the med ball, it can be used aerobically. It still keeps everything athletic. We really can't get into these transverse movements in the weight room very well. I think that's reserved for sports and athletics and throwing. And then, you get that nice increased velocity. People talk about speed work all the time, but with the barbell, you can only get so fast. You got to keep it in your hands. So it's like a bell curve, like it's going to slow down. Whereas the med ball, I feel like it just teaches this release and teaches this power. So if you held a gun to me and I only picked two, I'd probably pick, assault bike and a med ball and whatever their various methods. I think they're so versatile between the two of them.
For your conditioning work?
Yeah.
Yep. And then how about I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this here. So I think, we have the assault bike and the med ball routines fall underneath this conditioning umbrella. Have there been other influences, if you think more in this strength, hypertrophy, power realm? Have there been other really significant influences that you look back on, you're like, man, like this really helped me in a major way? It may be transitioning how you organize your training, or it could be, using a different implement over another implement, or a particular program or way of setting up sets and reps and things like that. Or do you feel like you've done a really good job, sticking to the basics and just being very consistent, and that consistency over time has just continued to expand upon itself?
Yeah, I think the latter. My programming's pretty vanilla. I don't use a lot of, as far as strength training goes, I don't use a lot of crazy methods. I don't do bands and chains or specialty barbells. Like I like straight bars. We'll use the specific implements for strongman, but pretty traditional linear training has worked well for me. I like the modern periodization style. So having accumulation blocks, working into more intensification, and then having your set peaking, and then just kind of repeating that process and, adding little bits over time. I've done a good job in my strength career of not trying to see humongous gains within a year, but just kind of taking that, brick by brick. Just I'll take my 10% better every year. And now 8 years in the sport, I'm starting to win competitions without any major injuries. And then without constantly changing the program and constantly changing the movements, the technique is so automatic. So instead of worrying about learning this new bar, learning this new method, I know exactly what I'm doing. I can just focus on performance. So yeah, keeping it really simple and using these traditional methods and just constantly like refining it over time has really worked well for me. And really all the athletes I coach are the same way.
I think that the two big ones there that jump out at me, I love the brick by brick analogy, because I think that there are a lot of people out there who just they don't want to go brick by brick. They want to go, here's a foundation, I'm just going to drop a whole house on it. Right. And
yeah.
Then the other bit there is just the consistency factor of being willing to play that long game. And it goes with the brick by brick analogy. And I think where so many people get themselves in trouble is they're not willing to play that game. It's pretty much, well, if I can't build a house in 3 months, then I'm not going to want to touch it. And so they get impatient and they start changing things every 6 weeks. And it's, I go to this program, then I'm going to go to this program, then I'm going to go to this program. And next thing you know, 6 months have gone by and you've done a lot of work, but you actually look at your progress and it's minimal to nothing, right? Because it just can't work that way. Do you find that you see that like relatively frequently?
Totally.
We see it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I got friends that like will tell me about their day trading all day long, and I'm like, I mean, I got a pretty killer retirement. I just save every month, and it's kind of like the same thing with training. Is like you can look at all these flashy methods, jump around. It's like how much are you really building wealth wise training? Like how much quality muscle and so I'm more of the repeat it over time and take your process. How do you know you're even getting better if you just constantly switch things up? So, which is why I like more the linear periodization and not constantly switching implements. Like I don't need to PR my box squat to 14 inches versus reverse mini bands on this specialty barbell. Like, it's, if you keep moving the goalpost, you can keep saying that you're hitting your target. But if you stick to the basics, you're kind of forced to it. Like the barbell doesn't lie. If it's not getting better on the same lifts, then you have to sit back and reevaluate what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And if you're actually putting in the work intelligently.
And then one place where you have way more experience in expertise than I do is with the kettlebell. And so, how do you like to utilize the kettlebell within your own training? Because that's one thing I
Yeah,
actually am really intrigued to hear. Because when we use the kettlebell, we're using it a lot of times, we're trying to create movement change. Or I think if you take, say, like a one arm kettlebell snatch, I think we can actually get power improvements out of that. But when I think about just a kettlebell swing or other variations, for me, I have a hard time figuring out what bucket do I place this in? Where do I actually bring this in to a program for somebody? So I'd love to hear how you like to use the kettlebell in your own training.
yeah. I mean, I love kettlebells. Yeah, I admittedly got into them because they were obscure, so it made me look cooler quicker. Um, but then what really is washed away is performance. You can't go to a meet and just your performance doesn't lie. So it caused me to put the kettlebell in more of a place that is reasonable and actually fits my training because I didn't want to lose it. So it's kind of like it's strength practice. A lot of times, like you said, it's a great way to teach a movement before moving on to the big stuff. But for me, it's like, it's almost like off-season work. Like it's good for a baseball player to then go maybe play flag football. So they're still throwing, but it's not the same intensity. So the kettlebell kind of does that for strongmen. And the aspect is a lot of hip dominant movements. It's uncomfortable. So like when you're doing 2 kettlebell squat or press, it's sitting on your chest. So, I've kind of learned now that really helps me encourage people to breathe through their upper back and posterior. The leverage is a little weird. So for some people, it's preferred. They like that better than a dumbbell. But it's not as hard on my joints as strongman, but I still get to practice a lot of strongman type movements. And like you said, some of the conditioning methods, if I'm not able to go run or have a rower at the house, a 60-pound kettlebell is much cheaper than that too. So it's really cost efficient. I still have a few kettlebells at the house.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like using the movements is like I said, practice and deloading off the major implements. And the other method is kettlebells. I don't think they build a lot of mass. It's independent. It's low leverage. So for somebody whose goal is hypertrophy, I don't think it's the best tool. For me, on the other end, like I mentioned earlier, I've stayed the same weight class. I don't want to get much bigger at this point. I just want to get stronger and more efficient at my body weight. So I think it's where kettlebell fits perfectly. Mm-hmm. If somebody was looking to add legitimate muscle mass, then I'm going to push them to the barbell or even some plate loaded machines and even make it less, leverage disadvantaged than the kettlebell. So I think some people try to paint the kettlebell as like, oh, you can still get big with them. I'm like, but why? Why not just use a better tool for it? Mm-hmm. So I use it as a strength tool without building mass and a deload under similar movement patterns for strongman.
Yeah, and I think when you start thinking about the sport of strongman, that off-season kettlebell work is going to do a lot in terms of just your general overall work capacity, right?
Oh yeah.
Do you have some? And
it's a killer grip tool. So, and if you haven't ever done kettlebell complexes or kettlebell snatch, like especially time snatches, like the tactical strength challenge or some of these snatch challenges through hardstyle training, it is killer on the grip. It really works the forearms, unlike other things. Like I'll do heavy farmer's carries, but there's nothing like a snatch test. So for strongman, that's an amazing tool is to have a really strong grip. So that's just another kind of secret benefit of them that I don't think you get with dumbbells and barbells because you're constantly setting them down. Versus a kettlebell, you're swinging and switching hands. So it just adds a little more grip training to it.
Do you have a generic kettlebell routine that you like for this off-season work capacity type modality or type work? Because like I've played around with stuff like that before in a warm-up where if I'm going to hit a phase of training that's maybe more metabolic stress oriented, like I'll front load the workout with a kettlebell medley of some kind, like single arm swing, single arm clean, single arm snatch, and kind of just give myself a short rest period. Really, more than anything, just trying to essentially upregulate metabolic pathways that I know are going to be a role once I get to my main work. I didn't know if you have anything in that realm that you tend to like for yourself or for your clients. If you're like, hey, we're just going to get through this, I want to start building some work capacity.
Yeah, I like. There's a couple complexes that we'll use, but I kind of individualize it to person. I like doing cardiac output. Some of my main ones. I like cardiac output set. I'll do like 30 minutes on the clock. Do get ups, goblet squats, kettlebell swings. So it's like you kind of have a red light, yellow light, green light for your heart rate. So the get up is like you bring your heart rate down, uh, swings, jack it back up, goblet squats, kind of maintain it. So I'll run through those 3 for 30 minutes straight as a nice full body work for cardiac output. Not a lot of stress, but like I said, more of just an output method. I really like kettlebell snatching, like I just mentioned earlier. So there's some snatch protocols that we'll go to. Some on the minute work is pretty go-to for me to condition the back, the hamstrings, and the grip. So kind of setting up these intervals. It's a little complicated to explain quickly, but essentially having a heavy, medium, and light day where you're hitting different volume progressions with the kettlebells. But as far as like complexes, I think I'm not very dogmatic with it, so I just kind of switch it up based on my interest, and I get a lot out of 2 kettlebell squatting. As somebody who doesn't do very well with squatting, especially backloaded squats, 2 kettlebell squats have always been really comfortable for me, especially with a little bit of heel lift. I think you get a ton of abs, and so that I'd probably go back to kettlebell squatting more than any other movement because it's just my most comfortable squat.
I do think that 2 kettlebell front squat is the best squat pattern builder around. If the outcome is trying to improve the squat pattern itself, so more of a movement outcome change, I still haven't found anything that I think builds that squat pattern better than a 2 kettlebell front squat. It's just
it's one of the best
it forces your hands.
You're going to do. Yeah.
Like it's almost impossible to mess up because if you try to hinge it or you get really wonky, you're just going to dump forward. Like you have to do it sitting down and up. It becomes a very vertical movement of the pelvis, which is what we're after.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was just worked it into our strongman program now, and a lot of those guys that try to get you heavy, like you said, they dump it and sort of teach them like let your knees come forward, sit straight down, and the 2 kettlebell squat is money for teaching the squat pattern, and like I mentioned before, it's a killer ab exercise. So you can't really hold those and stand upright without your abs kicking in. So I'll probably keep those around forever.
Yeah. 100%. If people listening have not done a proper 2 kettlebell front squat, go out of your way to do it. And it is ab city. As long as you're not the person that does this guy here, where we just hold the bells and just lean back to basically dump ourselves into our lower back. As long as you actually keep your, asshole underneath your ears, you're gonna feel abs. It's almost impossible for you to not feel abs when you get it. I've used that for squats. I've used it in a warm up and had people do marching, a more kind of dynamic way of bringing it together. But I think that 2 kettlebell front rack position is a really, really nice tool that people don't utilize probably as much as they should be.
Yeah, I usually, some of my favorite cues for it is you see a lot of people, they drive their elbows way forward. And like, no, you want to keep the elbows kind of connected to the body, like you're blocking a body shot. And then you want to prevent that leaning back, I tell people like, make a shadow over your feet with the kettlebells. So that forces them to stay upright, and instantly that kicks abs on. And then, I usually cue like, move through the knees with your squat, like bend through your knees. And if they can't do that, then, that's where the heel lift comes in, and you get to check the ego. Nobody's, hitting their total with a kettlebell squat. So we can just 100% focus on the movement with them. And usually those few cues work well for me. And you can see people instantly, oh crap, my abs kicked in. And it forces, once that's in and the kettlebells are on your chest, there's only one place to put air, and that's the back of you, and which a lot of big, strong men really struggle with. So it's a great compliment to any strength athlete, especially a good strongman.
Absolutely in agreement. So let's transition and talk about deadlifts, something that is near and dear to both of our hearts. What have been some really big, powerful contributors to building your deadlift over time, outside of the consistency factor, which we already mentioned? Is there anything else that you feel has really contributed to help build that deadlift over time?
It's tough to comment on this because it's been such a cumulative effect. I think it's such a technical lift. So the biggest thing for me is like more technique work. So I feel like squats and bench, I can just volume them away and build a lot of muscle. Deadlift has been something for me. I had to pull back on the high volume and work more of what's my setup look like? What muscle am I feeling? What's my bracing? What's the tempo here? So using a lot of the methods of like pause at the mid shin has been really good to like teach me to keep my hips low. Using like snatch grip deadlift has been a great way to just try to keep my erector strong, even Romanian deadlift to use hamstrings. So using the deadlift variations along with technique work has really, that's where I saw my numbers jump up. When I was trying to beat it up with volume, it was a slower climb. And then once you kind of slowed it down and was like, looked more at the physics of it rather than developing what muscles I thought were working. Like, is this bar over my midfoot and moving directly vertical the entire time? Is it sitting behind the shoulder joint? So I think just being more of a movement technician for the deadlift has made the most benefit. And then the one area I think that people get surprised on is I saw a huge benefit using high rep trap bar deadlifts. Is the trap bar, you can really bastardize it easily and make it a squat. But if you stick to the hinge and just focus on pushing through the feet and build up a lot of volume there, I really felt like that helped my leg drive off the floor. Like, I really trained the glutes and the quads. And I think I had my best improvement on deadlift. I went from like 650, 660 to 700. And I was working on a high rep trap bar deadlift program. And I was just working on 1x20. So I think it might have been you or somebody else. We were talking about 1x20. So it was like every Saturday, I would put a weight on there and try to hit for 20. And I took that from about 385 to like 520 throughout, so many months. Went into a deadlift program and just ended up hitting 700 within the training cycle. Like, it wasn't even a max effort day. So I was really surprised that the high rep work on that transferred so much max strength. And it kind of taught me that maybe it wasn't as advanced of a lifter as I thought it was. Like, that novice to intermediate lifter still sees a lot of improvements with hypertrophy work. And that included myself. So that was a surprising one that I wasn't really expecting.
Interesting. Yeah, I really like that. That high rep trap bar is such a good way to build volume because you're just not going to get so beat up, right? And we're still going to get hypertrophy in a lot of similar places. Still going to get hamstrings, still going to get glutes, still going to probably get lats. We're still going to get back. And I think pairing that with those more technical adjustments that you mentioned is a really nice way to run a training cycle of, I'm going to use more pause deadlifts, RDL variations, snatch grip variations to really dial in the technique on a straight bar. And then I can just hammer this trap bar to really build this volume and hypertrophy. And then when you cycle that in, do, more of an actual deadlift program, you're like, okay, rocket ship time, here we go. Right? Like, everything is just so more dialed in.
Yeah, Steve Tripp had me doing a lot of that. That monster. We would do just 2 or 3 sets of a main deadlift, but then we'd hit like 5 pauses, 4 sets of snatch grip, 4 sets of RDL. It's just beating everything. But it was, most of my work that day was on accessory work. And then I'd have a separate day of like either lighter trap bar for reps or lighter axle. And I just ended up going to nationals and crushing it. And I wasn't beating myself up with the heavy deadlifts. And it was like you said, the accessory work and the focus on being like powerful off the floor did the trick. So I know you can hear in the background. I thought I would be slow here. I got somebody deadlifting at the gym.
Oh,
so,
good. It's fitting.
Speak of the
it's
devil.
Fitting.
And you can hear the clicks. It's a high rep day. So pray for that guy.
It wouldn't be a podcast if we can't hear some weight in the background. I love it. Yeah, Steve is he's another one of those guys that is outrageously impressive in multiple ways. I remember when we had him on the podcast, that was over a year ago now. I was like, dude, I don't know how you do it, but the amount of volume that you handle in your training is outrageously impressive. He was like, oh, thank you.
He's just an animal. I think his construction background, the same approach that I had. Like, my grandpa was a laborer, and he didn't call into work because his legs were sore. Like, he went to work every day. He had to install that elevator shaft regardless. And so Steve and I think share that, like, this is my job. I'm going to go and show up and put in the work, even if nobody was watching or I'm sore or whatever. Like, just show up and do it, and don't complain about it. And so it becomes less burdensome when it's just something that I feel like has to be done, and that there are people out there laboring every day just to make a living, not complaining about it. So I can stop complaining and suck it up a little bit.
Exactly. I love that, man. I think that's a good way to start wrapping this sucker up. So last question I'm gonna ask you here, and we've hit so many, I think, big rocks. If for someone that's going to listen to this episode, if they're going to walk away with one thing, what is the one thing that you want them to walk away with?
I think the filling the buckets is probably the biggest changer for me. that I totally stole from you and I use it all the time is the idea of being an apex athlete that, the tide's going to rise all the ships in your training. If you can just get better at one of your weak areas, whether you're measuring max strength, hypertrophy, conditioning, hybrid of all of them, power, movement IQ, is identifying where your weakness is and addressing it and bringing it up. And it's not like you're taking chips from one bucket to another. You're literally adding new material. You're adding new things, and it's just going to make the whole package better. So, if you're a strength athlete, obviously commit to your sport while you're in it, 100%. Be specific. And then as soon as it's over, like actually commit to filling up your other buckets. Don't just keep dabbling in what you're doing. Like commit to a new thing. Build your endurance. Maybe it's your heart rate recovery, or maybe it's your movement ability sucks, or your ability to tie them all together. Like commit to that and then come back to your program. And you'll notice like it just keeps layering over and over and over. And that mindset, it just made me feel like a legitimate athlete. And then when you approach it like professional, you start to train and perform like professional. So that's, if I could share with anybody, and that's one of the first things I tell people when they walk in the door is how to assess all your buckets and actually commit to filling them up.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely, man. I think the fill your buckets is a very powerful theme that we have and carry here at Rebel. And then for me, I think the one takeaway I want for people is the brick by brick consistency. I think at the end of the day, that's what most people need more than anything, is just showing up, being consistent, treating it like a professional, like you just mentioned. If you can take that impatience that we have as humans and check your ego and be willing to show up every single day and do the work and lay the brick, you will be astounded with where you can be in 6 to 12 months. So that's mine.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Yeah. It's amazing the difference over time. And saying I'm just going to build this brick instead of, like you said, dumping the whole house on it. If you just take that a little bit better all the time, it might take a little bit longer than others. But if you get injured, that's 3 to 6 months off that you just got worse. And so if you can just get a little bit better and never get injured and work on these weaknesses, then you develop a package that's unstoppable versus trying to make up for lost time and injure yourself or go down the wrong pathway and wrong programming. Taking that brick by brick approach has helped me out. And, it may have kept me from achieving some stuff at some point in my career, but I'm still going, no surgeries, no issues, still competing at a high level and doing multiple things. So I'll take that trade-off all day. The what if I could have done more versus the I'm healthy and still ready to keep going now. That fits, especially owning a business and being a family man. You can't afford to take all this time off being hurt. Mm-hmm. And other people develop respect for it as a coach, and clients see it and they don't want to get injured either. They don't want to do all this crazy stuff. They appreciate the consistency to it.
For sure. Absolutely, man. Love that. So let's do this. Where can people go to find you if you would like to be found?
Yes, I'm still available. I have Instagram is where I do spend most of the my public time. Is my name is Be Strong, Be Strong KY. The website is bestrongky.com. We're a gym in Erlanger, Ellesmere, Northern Kentucky. So if you're in the Cincinnati area, I have an actual gym you can come to 24/7. But through my social media, it's got links to my websites. I sell programs online. We got a kettlebell program at Rebel Performance Shop. That's pretty cool.
Excellent. Awesome. All right, everybody. Be sure to go check out Be Strong KY on Instagram. The website, we'll link to all of that in the show notes as well, so that you will have it. It's funny, actually, I wore your shirt to the gym the other day, and somebody was like, "Oh, dude, I love that," because on the back, it just says, what is it? Is it lift?
Repeat until strong.
Repeat until strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some guy was like, "Oh, I love it. That's so good."
That's my favorite. My clients, whenever they hear that from me, they know they're doing something right.
I love it. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Ben, my man, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. This was fantastic. Have an amazing week, everybody, and we will be back next Monday. All right. Chat soon.